The other mistake people are making these days is they think somebody's going to win the gender wars. You have feminist shock troopers on one side, these red pill goblins in the manosphere on the other, and each think that they're going to put one over on the other side, or that the other side is the problem. That's just going to lead even faster to our extinction. Nobody wins the gender wars. We evolve for deeply complementary and very asymmetric needs. We evolved each other. Men evolved women. Women evolved men for very different survival strategies and mating strategies. Unless you get a handle on that and stop blaming the other gender, we're in a world of hurt.
Welcome. My latest book is called Creating Cultures of Belonging. It puts forward a simple thesis that human beings need to belong, that we crave community, and that we are failing to create those communities. What's more, some would argue that much of the problem is in our mating rituals that have been thrown off by living online, that men and women have developed amnesia about how to be with each other. But is that true? Or is it that we need to remember that dating and relationships are wired into us at a very primal level? And that if we could find a way to recall this, we could find our way back to belonging. Our guest today says that the rituals of community, especially pair bond dating, are part of our primal psychology, that we can tap into the primal wiring and find love, community, and belonging. Welcome to the Dov Baron Show. Come for the stories, stay for the learning. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I advise high-performing leaders and organizations how to harness their emotional source code to transform their tribe. Our guest today is Tim Ash. Tim is the CEO and co-founder of a digital optimization agency. He's helped create over $1.2 billion in value for leading companies like Google, Expedia, eHarmony, Facebook, American Express, Canon, Nestle, Cisco, and many others. Tim Ash is an acknowledged authority on evolutionary psychology, persuasion, and digital marketing. He is a sought-after international keynote speaker, just came back from Brazil. He's an executive advisor, best-selling author of several books, including Unleash Your Primal Brain and his latest, Primal Dating. Tim has been cited by Forbes as a top 10 online marketing expert and by Entrepreneur Magazine as an online marketing influencer to watch. You're tuned into the Dov Baron Show. Each episode is an exploration of the minds shaping the world today. Every episode is a raw, unscripted collaboration between me and my guests as we dive into discovering the truths that few dare to reveal. We find guests for you who are sometimes unknown to the general public, but absolute titans in their field, the kinds of people high-profile individuals turn to when they need an edge. If you're the kind of leader who craves depth over sound bites, hit that subscribe button right now, because this is where real thinkers come to sharpen their edge. Please turn up the volume and help me welcome author of Unleash Your Primal Brain and his latest, Primal Dating, bold, blunt, and straightforward book that forces us to confront the uncomfortable truths about biology and status in dating. Welcome, Tim.
Thanks, Dov. It's great to be back.
Cheers, mate. I always enjoy our conversations, whether we are recording them for the public or not. We always have great convos, and I'm looking forward to this one. I know this is kind of a different angle because people are used to this being about leadership. So for people who are not familiar with evolutionary psychology, particularly in the context of dating, tell us, why should people continue to listen to this episode?
I see evolutionary psychology as foundational to just about everything we do. It's the operating system for human beings, at least at the animal level. To understand how we evolved helps us understand where we picked up various behaviors, how we make decisions, and so on. My previous book, Unleash Your Primal Brain, was a review of all of that in a very readable format. There's some things we share in common with fruit flies, like dopamine, in order to meet our energy and chase goals. There's other things we share only with other mammals. And there's some things at the end of our evolutionary arc that are uniquely human, like language, learning culture, and so on. So if you want to understand human beings, you really need to dig into evolutionary psychology. I've applied it effectively to marketing. I have a leadership framework called the Initiated Tribe around how this applies to building powerful corporate cultures. And of course, it can be applied to our mating and dating and relationships.
I find that there's a lot of people in executive positions. They're on those apps and maybe even using matchmakers to find the right partner. Where are they going wrong? They're all really busy. They're high profile and they're saying, I don't have time for dating, but I don't want to be on my own for the rest of my life. So I'm using a matchmaker.
Yeah, it's like, what were you doing? Dial up on AOL just then?
I've never been on a dating app.
I don't know that I'm going to start with your premise, which is where did we go wrong? I think that most people have no clue about us as a species or what we evolved for, the massive asymmetries between men and women. And that's buried under a bunch of cultural assumptions these days. But if there is someplace we went wrong, we were designed for one environment, wandering around the plains of East Africa with a few dozen other people, a third of whom we were related to this civilization with 8 billion people on the planet. A lot of things are misfiring because we're not in the right context anymore. We can certainly go into all of that, but I wouldn't blame it on individuals. There is a bit of an attitude, though, on an individual level, which is that people view dating or relationships as something optional, like it's some kind of cherry on top of your life sundae. And it's not. It's the most primal need on the planet. Mating and passing on your genes is why life exists in the first place. And it's deadly serious from an evolutionary standpoint. So we can't treat it as a little add-on.
But don't you think that is a lot of what we're doing? When you look at the population decline around the world, particularly in wealthier countries, we know that the more wealthy a country gets, the more the population declines. Only in poorer countries are people having 7 or 8 kids, but in the UK, it's under what is needed for continuing the population. Same in America, same in most first world countries. Japan could likely disappear in 2 or 3 generations as far as the Japanese people are concerned. So
yeah,
I think that many times we are treating it as the cherry on top of the economics of our life.
At the end of the book, my brilliant co-author, Limor Gottlieb, and I talk about some of our personal ideas. And one of them is exactly that as quickly as human populations rose on this planet and grew exponentially, that's how quickly they're going to go down on the other side. We're living in this unique moment in history where we're going to see that population reverse. China, despite their claims of 1.4 billion, they're probably 300 to 400 million post-COVID. Germany's dying out, Italy's dying out, Japan, South Korea. And the US, the fertility replacement rate is about 2.1. In the US, it's about 1.6 without immigration. So also on that downhill slide already. And so this is a civilizational thing, and we don't really have a business model. Fascism, capitalism, communism, none of those work when you don't have the pyramid anymore of a lot of young people on the bottom, a few oldsters on top. That's now become a chimney straight up and down, and it's now flipping into an inverted pyramid. We have no business model or economic or social model for that. What I realized after writing this book is this really goes civilization deep.
I'm really fascinated by where this is all going. I know that China just developed the ability to have non-human wombs so that people who can't have children can have children. They're talking about within 2 years, it'll be available for less than 10 grand for a couple. Is that part of the solution? But that takes away this human connection piece, this need to belong, this need for a partner, this need for a relationship, which is inherent within us.
And I can describe the asymmetries of that. The other mistake people are making these days is they think somebody is going to win the gender wars. You have feminist shock troopers on one side, these red pill goblins in the manosphere on the other, and each think that they're going to put one over on the other side, or that the other side is a problem. That's just going to lead even faster to our extinction. Nobody wins the gender wars. We evolve for deeply complementary and very asymmetric needs. We evolved each other. Men evolved women. Women evolved men for very different survival strategies and mating strategies. Unless you get a handle on that and stop blaming the other gender, we're in a world of hurt.
I'd like to say I know the solution, but I don't. And I don't know if we can wake up fast enough. That, for me, is really the important question. Can we wake up fast enough at a consciousness level? Before we go into that, you've been driven by primal psychology. You've used that as a marketing skill set and taught that and helped companies around the world. And now this book seems to be quite different because it's about dating. One of the things that fascinates me about human beings, they don't have a sense of purpose about their life. They think they do, but they don't really. It seems like this thread of this primal psychology piece is being pulled through by you. What is your purpose?
Oh, well, I'm very clear on my purpose, and you and I have talked about this. I actually have two purpose statements. One is the positive one, and the other is the unconscious when it's driving the train and I'm unaware of it. I try to bring that shadow in Jungian terms in front of me and talk about it. So I'll tell you my two purposes. My positive purpose is I co create a world of peace, safety, and love through joyous expression and service.
Tell us the shadow.
And the shadow purpose is I create a world of loneliness, disconnection, and pain by seeking distractions, acting like a victim, and indulging in self righteous anger.
So tell us why somebody should look at the two sides of that, why they should look at their own shadow purpose. Because I think that oftentimes people's purpose is not really a purpose, it's some manufactured thing that they came up with that sounds good, but they're not emotionally connected to it. And I think that's vitally important. It's like, oh, this is my purpose. And I'm like, is it really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, but why do you need the shadow part?
Why do I need both? Purpose is not a mission and it's not a smart goal. It's something you can directionally aim towards. It's your North Star. The problem with North Stars is you can approach them from any direction you want. So I need to know my own personal, where am I coming from? That's my unconscious. That's when my tapes run my life. I want to catch myself moving from that shadow purpose towards my positive. That creates a vector for me that says you want to put this as far behind you as you can or catch it as early as possible and move towards your positive purpose. So I feel I need both. They're awareness tools. The shadow purpose is one that I try to catch as early as possible and as small as possible so it doesn't take over big chunks of my life. The positive one is really a decision-making tool. Will I put my energy, my life force, my time into something? It's either a hell yes because it's close to my purpose or it's a hard no. I don't do maybes anymore.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I certainly can relate. So let's come back to this evolutionary psychology piece. You seem to be putting forward that it's pretty deterministic. So why do so many people violate those rules? Women will often, for instance, choose unstable men for long-term relationships. Men will invest heavily without paternity certainty. Those things seem to be contradictory to what you're saying.
I'll challenge you on paternity certainty. Evolutionarily speaking, we're not monogamous. Very few species, especially mammals, are monogamous, about 3% to 5% of all animal species. Men and women have long-term and short-term strategies that optimize things. We have jealousy running at very high levels in our species, but uncertain paternity is not that huge a factor. About 1% of people being raised by their non-biological father. You can think of our jealousy as an overactive alarm system that rings the bells anytime something might happen that might be bad for you. Jealousy, like all other things with men and women, is asymmetric. For men, it's about uncertain paternity. You don't want to invest your life force into somebody and it's a genetic dead end. For women, it's when you start withdrawing resources. They test you for continual provisioning because they're the ones that had to take care of a helpless baby for years for it to become viable. So we have jealousy, but it's rooted in very different things.
But as I said, on the other side of that is these women, you and I both know them, who invest heavily in men who are losers, who
Is that right?
you may not be familiar with that level of psychology, but many of these women will invest in them. And many men, including myself, are heavily invested in our stepchildren. There's the evolutionary, I get that, but there's also the psychology of the emotional source code of that individual, where they were born, what they grew up with, what became their familiarity. Those things seem contradictory. Maybe I'm wrong.
It's not contradictory. Let's bring it down to the lowest level possible. What is evolution? It says that people of roughly equal value pair up long enough to have an offspring, and that offspring is viable so it can have its own offspring. Nowhere in there is it say functional relationship, your personal happiness. None of that matters. It's more like a junior high cafeteria where people sort into equal levels. You have the cool kids on one side, you have the ultra nerds and the losers on the other side. And everybody wants to do better, but the reality is nobody's choosing you if they're way out of your league or vice versa. So it's just this rough sorting. We call it, in terms of behavioral economics, we call that sexual marketplace value. How attractive are you to other people, broadly speaking? And then within that, like you say, there's the personal stuff, your trauma, your genes, your upbringing, your addictions, your culture, your beliefs on top of all that. The point is, there's nothing to optimize here. It's a rough equivalence of finding a somewhat comparable partner. That's all you get in this life.
Sometimes you're ending up with a partner who is like, I can think of lots of people I know who have invested, but not with somebody who can do an equal payback on whatever the measurement is. You know what I mean?
Well, there is no equal payback. So I would challenge that and say that means they don't have the personal development and they're actually functioning much lower than you think they are. So they do deserve that partner because they haven't figured out their crap yet.
But they haven't figured out their crap. That's entirely my point, as opposed to it being evolutionary. That's an evolving of consciousness rather than an evolutionary psychology.
So I'm not talking about evolving of consciousness at all. I'm talking about evolving across generations genetically. Everybody's got their intergenerational trauma. I'm not talking about the personal level of whether we can evolve as a society or as individuals. I'm just talking about as a species at the genetic level. There's no exceptions to that. A lot of the problems we have are the belief systems in our head and the culture in our head. That's what's misfiring and leading us astray. We're the only species that is a cultural learner. We don't adapt physically to our environment. We learn the culture of the tribe around us, and that's kind of our life hack. Well, to do that, you also have to believe in that cultural overlay instead of what's really underneath it. We're trying to bring it down, get rid of those cultural overlays and focus on the evolutionary psychology and biology, and you'll be grounded in something more akin to reality.
So in the book, you talk about the sexual marketplace and you talk about the brokenness, right? Perhaps the brokenness is more about expectations than it is about biology. Does part of the book risk sort of nostalgia of a make dating great again? Maybe that simpler past never really existed.
Yeah, there was no golden age, not 50 years ago, 500, 5,000, or 50,000 years ago. There was always this brutal sorting based on evolution and pressures around you and the available choices you had in the moment. There's nothing glamorous about it. So I don't think I want to make dating great again. I just want to prepare people for how they should approach it. By the way, this book is called Primal Dating, but it's really not about dating. We've had tons of married people and in long-term relationships read it. This is really more akin to men are from Mars, women are from Venus, but unlike John Gray's pseudoscience, it's actually rooted in reality. This serves to help understand the other sex and yourself. There's the evolutionary part of it, the modern distortions and guides for women and men separately, because they need different asymmetric advice and insights.
We're going to definitely go into that a little bit more. Let's start with the unflinching guide for men. I agree with your comment that being nice will never be enough. I love the title of the book, Nice Guys Finish Last. We're back to not primal psychology, but Jungian psychology dealing with our shit, which is that many of us grow up, I know I did, grow up being nice because it's a survival mechanism, but it's actually makes sure that the only thing you get is welcome tattooed on your back so people can wipe their feet on you. I'm also cautious that by telling guys being a nice guy isn't enough, they polarize that and it starts feeding red pill ideology of people like Andrew Tate, which creates horrible behavior and justifies some men manipulating rather than having authentic growth.
Let me try to unpack that a little bit. So let's start with a couple of foundational ideas. One is where there are massive asymmetries between men and women. Two, that varies a lot by life stage. Okay, so let me tackle each of those. The asymmetries between men and women are primarily based on the amount of risk. So imagine that a woman had to have a man provision for her back in the day and take care of her helpless baby. Men are on average 25% larger. We have 15 to 20 times the testosterone for risk and aggression. And women are essentially breeding us to be their single best option because our ability to continue to provide for the woman and the offspring is what they're looking for. On the other side of that, that means that men were bred to be risk takers. That means rolling the dice, and sometimes it comes up craps, and other times it comes up sevens. So in any particular dimension, whether it's behavioral or psychological, you'll find that women and men, on average, are almost the same. or very close. What's different is the spread of those bell curves and the distribution. Women are risk avoiders, and they're going to much more tightly cluster around that midpoint. Whereas on any behavioral axis, men are going to be wildly divergent. So you have a lot more geniuses and a lot more idiots. You'll have a lot more cowards and a lot more heroes. That's what women are pushing us genetically to do. There are twice as many women as men in our genetic past. That means most women got to reproduce, most guys not so much. They had to take big risks, and you either made the cutoff or you didn't. So the major difference between men and women is our willingness and ability to take risk.
So let's talk to that, because it's where we were earlier, which is this declining in population. And we've also got a massive decline in testosterone in men. We're seeing that. Results are coming back scientifically that men's testosterone levels have dropped enormously. They're sitting in their mother's basement playing games and not going out into the world. They're not meeting, and they're not taking those risks. A lot of what you've talked about is this ability to take risks, that this is wired into us, that we need to take risk. But to take the risk, you need testosterone. If your body's not producing the testosterone because of diet or a million other things, then where do we go? I'm wanting to confront this issue because I see that this is happening at all levels, not just in dating, but even in leadership. I can see the wimpy cowardice to even stand up for what it is I believe in.
There are environmental factors on the amount of testosterone, diet, microplastics, whatever, play a role. And even what kind of relationship you're in. While you're single, your testosterone levels are higher. As soon as you become a father, they drop because you go into nurturing protective mode. Estrogen goes up, testosterone goes down quite a bit. It also varies with what role or situation you're in. I agree with you that in general, men have essentially stepped back and stepped out of the arena in many ways. Part of that has to do with the economic changes that happen with birth control and women stepping into the workforce. There are societies where women are just expected to be baby incubators, right. Traditional societies. The problem is in the modern world, you can't have half of the workforce not participate. So as soon as women took control of their reproductive destiny and started being able to make their own way through the world, inevitably, there was a move towards them in the workplace. One of the consequences of that is that women delayed childbirth. In the US, over a few decades, the age of first marriage for a woman went from 23 to about 29 and a half.
Right.
That's a massive shift in a very short time. One of the things we talk about in the book is this idea of crossing curves. Men's and women's, on average, desirability over their lifetime looks like an X. Women start high and then go down for the rest of their lives, and men start low and go up and peak between 40 and 60, a soft peak around 50. So what that really means is that women are kind of delaying having kids as late as possible. That crossover point is at 30 across all cultures. That's why you hear about the biological clock. Women are losing most of their ability to attract the mates they want between 20 and 40 during their fertile years. Men are just the opposite. Young men are pretty useless. They're useless to women because they can't provide the lifestyle they want, and they don't know how to enter into relationships with them. They're useless to other men like us. I'm like, hey, Junior, I have to train you and mentor you to make you useful. Men are useless early, and this is something that women don't want to hear. Middle-aged women lose a lot of their value too in the mating marketplace. Now, you can say I have my MBA and I own my house and I still look great in my Lululemons when I go to my yoga class. That's wonderful, but after 30, men have a growing and permanent advantage for the rest of their lives vis-a-vis the average woman. And a lot of women don't want to hear that.
But at the same time, we are seeing, as you pointed out, women who are going on to much higher education than men. That has completely shifted. Their earning capacity, men are staying in the basement, not really getting an education, not really doing much. And at the same time, complaining that women are high and mighty. This gets this red pill mentality, this toxic masculinity shit going on. So if I was to say to you, okay, let's address the red pill problem.
There are a ton of distortions in the modern marketplace. One of the ones we've talked about is related to women doing so well. By the way, it's like in the US, it's 60% of bachelor's degrees awarded to women. They're out earning men in major metro areas until they decide to have a child. I have a daughter studying computer engineering. I hope she has a great career. I have a son, and I hope he has a great career, and I hope they have satisfying, meaningful relationships. One of the problems, though, is that women place their bet on the one best guy they can land, essentially. That's called hypergamy. They'll never date down. Can you provide at least the lifestyle I'm accustomed to? But ideally, it's better. So what happens when the women are doing better is they're only considering the superstar men. So people that historically would have been a good match for them are essentially invisible. The state of play in modern dating is this. Most men are invisible. Middle-aged women, especially educated ones, are pissed off. And the Chads are going to town. The top 5, 10% of guys, they have all the optionality in the world. All the women are chasing them. And they will never settle or go exclusive with anybody. Being a high value man is the same as being a young, attractive woman. And just like the young girls are beating them off with a stick for a decade, now the guys are in the same boat. They're being told, you're just an asshole. No, I have optionality and I'm going to do what I need to do with it, because here's the dirty little secret. Evolution bred men to do just about everything for sexual optionality. Pyramids being built, armies, wars, men are essentially trying to up their game and be more powerful. And what that means is that once you get the optionality, we see this all the time. Why do rich, powerful men screw around? It's not a random thing. The answer is because they can for the first time in their lives.
This is very interesting. That's a great place for us to take a break at the end of part 1 of the show. This is a fascinating conversation, Tim. I want to make sure that people can find out more about you, about all of your books, about all of your resources. Please tell people where they can find out more.
Sure, absolutely. So if you're looking to book me for keynote speeches or my executive advisory to help senior executives at companies with culture, marketing, whatever you need from an evolutionary psychology perspective, timash.com. The books are easy to find. My previous book, Unleash Your Primal Brain, Demystifying How We Think and How We Act, that's at primalbrain.com. And the new book, Primal Dating, is at primaldating.com. So pretty easy to find. And please connect with me on LinkedIn.
Well, we'll make sure that all those links are posted in the show notes. You'll be able to find out more right there. We're going to come back in just one click for more of our delicious conversation with the unique Tim Ash. Stay curious, my friends. Stay curious. Welcome back to part 2 of our delicious conversation with Tim Ash. Tim is the CEO and co-founder of a digital optimization agency. He's helped create over $1.2 billion in value for leading companies like Google, Expedia, American Express, and a bunch of other really powerful companies. He is an acknowledged authority in evolutionary psychology, persuasion, and digital marketing. And on top of all that, he's the author of a couple of really great books called Unleash Your Primal Brain, and his latest one, which is Primal Dating, which is what we've been talking about here. And really helping us to understand that how we are approaching connecting with another individual, how we're approaching dating as being more than just how we come at each other, but the mindsets that we have around it and what the challenges are, how things are getting in the way of that. Where I want to sort of pick up the conversation is in that we have these, according to Tim and his book, we have these kind of distortions about this modern dating marketplace. Can we jump into that right out there, Tim? How do you see these distortions?
People talk about the marketplace. That's an economic term, as you know, and it roughly assumes there's lots of players in the marketplace and equal number of buyers and sellers, and everyone's got a realistic view of their value. Well, none of those things are true in the modern dating marketplace or relationship marketplace. Let's start with the fact that in online dating, which, by the way, is where more than half of relationships now start, the majority now start in online dating, there are twice as many men as women. That is a massive distortion. So that's factor 1. Factor 2 is that there are 3 decision points in any long-term relationship. The first is the man deciding whom to approach. The second is the woman deciding whom to have sex with. And the third, and this is what a lot of women actually don't realize, is after you have sex, the power flips back to the man, and then it's the man deciding how much he wants to provision or invest on an ongoing basis in that relationship. That's the man's third choice. So what happens, though, is at the beginning of that process, who's going to approach whom? Well, in the past, you might have gone to the bar, bought somebody a drink, got shot down, got laughed at. There are consequences to it. But now you're online and you're just swiping. Consequence-free approaches. That's how men think about it. The problem is on the flip side of that, you have hundreds and hundreds of people in every woman's inbox. It makes them think that they're all tens when they're not. It's just the guy sampling them. It doesn't mean every one of those is going to give you a lifetime commitment. So the second is men's approach behavior has been dialed up to 11. It's really crazy. Another distortion is what we talked about, hypergamy, that women are only looking for their single best option, and they're doing extraordinarily well. There's been this massive quantum leap over the last few decades. So all of a sudden, most men are now not being considered by them at all. And then the final factor is what I call stranger danger. In the men's guide, in terms of insights about women, one of the things we start with is women's underlying primary concern in all situations is safety.
Of course.
But most men don't think of it that way. I don't feel physically unsafe, for example, walking down most streets. So what you have is, of course, safety from other men, but also from their intimate partners. Like you might be one of those guys that axe murders me and dissolves me in a 55-gallon drum of lye or something. Who knows? Or you might be a Nigerian prince who wants some Bitcoin from me or whatever.
We do know that most women who are attacked by intimate partners.
Yeah, exactly. My co-author, Limor Gottlieb, she studied intimate partner violence and non-monogamy and things like that as part of her PhD work. So yeah, it's a serious thing. 1 out of every 3 women is sexually assaulted in their life. That's no joke. And 1 out of every 6 men, by the way. And almost all the assaulters are men. Again, there's that high testosterone. So when women properly have what I call stranger danger, and on a scale of 1 to 10, everybody online is a stranger. They'll knock you down a couple of points just because they don't know you in real life. And so you combine these 4 factors, a massive imbalance in the ratio, men's approach behavior being crazy, women doing really well and still looking for someone better, and stranger danger. And all of a sudden, it's like we're talking past each other. There's no more middle ground.
So let's go to I think is the most important thing, which is the practicality of that. Everything you've just named is a reality. There's no doubt about this. Men are feeling incredibly rejected. They're being swiped past all the time because they're not 6 foot tall.
Right. Which, by the way, that's about 16% of the population in the US.
Yeah, it's a small portion of the population. And if it's 16%, of those 16%, how many of them are already taken, already in long-term committed relationships, not open to anything else? How many of those guys are also gay? So now you're looking for a straight man who's single and available, who's over 6 feet. You're in like fractional.
And isn't an addict and have some kind of trauma of their own or mental illness. Yeah, good luck with that. Oh, and by the way, also makes more money than you. Yeah.
It's so fractional and so distorted that it's very easy for guys to feel like, what's the point, man? I'm 5'9".
Which, by the way, is my height.
I've got a good job. I'm doing all right, but I'm not driving a Bentley. I don't have all the bling, and I don't go to the club and buy a private table. So what I really wanted to get to, Tim, was like, a lot of these things you're putting forward are definitely, absolutely, undeniably true, but these are still the problems we're facing. What's the practicality of where do we go with some of this?
Okay, well, so for men, especially young men, the reason I believe they turn to the red pill community is because of the hopelessness. They're just like, screw it, at least I'll get my rocks off and get my physical needs met. That's opting out. Or like you say, play video games in mom's basement. That's another reaction to it. But really, one of the things that men need to understand is your values start slow, and you have to practice 2 things to eventually have more optionality with women. One is game, but I don't mean it in the red pill way. How to approach women, how to enter into relationships with women, how to leave relationships with women. Practice. You have to practice relationship stuff. The second is creating a compelling lifestyle. No, you don't have to have the Bentley. You don't have to be a baller, but you do have to have something compelling. And both of those things require men to grind for a couple of decades. There's just no shortcuts to it. What I want to give men and my son is like this long-term view. Every day you're getting more valuable and better as long as you put in the work along those 2 dimensions.
But again, I'm still at the same challenge, which is they're not doing that.
If you opt out of that, again, that's an important caveat. As long as you put in real work in both of those directions, if you opt out of that, that just makes everything crash down even faster. And you're going to have a miserable life. You'll be lonely. You get to middle age and you haven't figured out how to be attractive to women or how to provision. Nobody's going to want you.
Yeah, I did a post a while ago about several subjects, but one of the pieces in it was that Andrew Tate is not a problem, and the red pill misogynistic guys are not a problem. They're a solution. They're a bad solution to a problem we're not addressing. And so it's like these young fellas are not feeling heard. And then Andrew Tate says, you are a loser. And here's how to not be a loser. So there's a part of that which is talking about what you're talking about, which is you got to grind and you got to make more money. But it's so disrespectful.
It's not either or. So it's like if you think you can just be a pickup artist and learn all those tricks and how to be attractive to women, which for a lot of people don't practice it, it looks a lot like you're an asshole, basically, mistreat women. Or you can just focus on your career and ignore the relationship part of things. Both of those are dead ends. You have to do both. One of the things we talk about is men basically have one attractiveness axis. Are you physically desirable? Because we can visually inspect a woman, see if her hip to waist ratio is right and facial symmetry, all that. And are you a big pain in the ass? It's a single axis.
Right.
Okay. Are you high maintenance and how hot are you, basically? For women, they actually have two independent axes, which we just talked about. One is the genetic one, which is, am I attracted to you? And the other is, will you provision me long-term and stick around? They need both. So at the bottom of that, no provisioning, no game, you're invisible. If you're attractive, but you can't provision, that's the bad boy. And usually women place their bets on those men earlier. And if their ability to provide doesn't materialize, they dump the Harley riding or the band singer early on. Or a lot of guys, and this is where I think you're talking about kind of the softer guys, they end up in the friend zone. That means like I can provision you, but you don't find me attractive. And what that is like, I'll listen to you. I'll be your pit crew. I'll buy you dinner. I'll be your girlfriend, in effect. And the women wish they liked these guys, but without that attraction part, it just doesn't work. And by the way, this is one piece of advice we give to men. If you end up in the friend zone, you will never leave the friend zone. That only happens in romantic comedies and movies. So you have to work from moment one to not end up in the friend zone. You have to be clear that there's a sexual interest and an intimacy interest. And if you think just being nice will get you there, no, it just gets you friend zone faster. And once that happens, there's no going back. So women are looking for both. They want high provisioning and high attractiveness. That's the husband material. That's Prince Charming. And again, they're all chasing that. And because of the distortions of how well they're doing, that just means, like I said, the Chads are having a field day.
Right. As you know, I'm by birth British, and I'm still the biggest fan of British comedy. And there's some fantastic comedy out there. One of them is a lady called Catherine Tate, who is brilliant. If you haven't heard of Catherine Tate, go watch her stuff on YouTube. She is hysterical. She does bit shows where she does scenes, and she's fantastic. But one of the scenes is that she's on the steps going into her apartment, and the guy she's been on the date with is in front of her, and she says, I'd really like to invite you in. And he goes, oh, great. And she goes, and have sex with you. And he goes, yeah. She goes, but I'm just not drunk enough. And he goes, well, maybe we could go in and have another drink. And she goes, no, I'm already blind drunk. And he goes, well, maybe just one more drink. She goes, I can barely stand up, but I'm just not drunk enough. I'm sorry, I'm just not drunk enough. And it's just like, it's so beautifully stated. As you said, this transitory idea of the man, the bad boy, or whatever it is, there's a transitory state, but that's not the state of being a partner, which is a different motivation, as you talked about, of being, quote, attractive and being able to provide.
Yeah, that's what we call it, the diamond of women's selection, how women select men. So we attract and select differently across the two genders, and there's short-term and long-term differences as well. We play side bets. But yeah, that the diamond of women's selection is for long-term relationships.
So let's talk about this on a different piece, which is monogamy. Now, this conversation around monogamy has been around forever, which is monogamy natural? And you and I think, are going to get into some conflict on this, and it's good because men have this desire to spread their seed, etc., is the argument, right? And women are looking for a long-term provider, etc. Talk to us about your point of view on monogamy and commitment, because I think those are maybe different.
Okay, well, let me unpack those. So, first of all, men and women have short and long term strategies. Both have them. So, for the man, short term, sure, spread my seed as widely as possible. But men have a tension with the long term strategy, which is if I just get you pregnant and leave, that kid's not surviving. So I didn't accomplish my genetic goals either. So men have to provision and invest in one woman. That's the origin of what culturally can be called the Madonna whore complex. Oh, you're a slut, but I want my wife to be a virgin. So I wouldn't consider you the slut for anything long term. But that's that, again, those two drives and tensions. And for women, it's really the same thing. They need the long term provisioning for the man. But if you look at their reactions when they're ovulating, they want the strong, chiseled jawline, alpha, good genes type. That's why men are worried about being cuckolded, is because, yeah, you did it with the pool boy and I'm raising his kids all of a sudden. There's a tension with women in terms of long and short-term strategies as well. So having said that, though, the main thing about monogamy is it's really clear that at a species level, we're not lifelong monogamous. Even if you look at our closest great ape cousins, you have the silverback gorillas. They have internal balls and no competition. All the other guys are sulking in the corner. You have bonobos on the other extreme, are kind of hippie cousins, and they'll use sex for everything. It's like friends with benefits is like a handshake. It's saying hello. It's social relationships. It's stress relief. And that society is very matriarchal because you only know who the mother was. You don't usually know who the father was. So there's a wide range, and we're kind of in between. We have external balls, which is for cooling and capacity and the ability to ejaculate more than once a day, but they're not giant like the chimpanzees or the pygmy chimps, the bonobos. So we're kind of in that awkward middle years of evolution because we need to raise big-headed babies for a long time. We definitely need to invest in them, but we're not lifelong monogamous. So that's the kind of biological reality. And then people put all kinds of stuff on top of it and wish it was different.
No, and I understand the biology of it. So here's my argument, and you may fully disagree with it, and that's okay too. The interesting thing for me is that I think that biologically, you're absolutely right. Biologically, we are not monogamous. The idea that men can ejaculate multiple times a day, that we, et cetera, all the things you just said. I don't need to repeat those. At a biological level. But at a consciousness and evolutionary level, I would suggest that we are monogamous. That there's a point when we stop behaving like apes and we choose something that will evolve us. And so I know that I am monogamous. I'm in a long-term 27-year marriage, monogamous, and happy to be monogamous. Now, let me pause and say that at a biological level, do I desire other women? Of course.
Even Jimmy Carter sinned in his heart.
So, you can find somebody very attractive and very desirable. You have a choice there about whether you're going to follow through on that or not. And that, for me, is the evolution of the psychology, the evolution of the consciousness of that individual, where I am going, because my commitment is not just to the monogamy, but to the evolution of this coupling, the evolutioning of me, how I evolve in this coupling. So it's an interesting piece, and it may not disagree with what you're saying. It may sidebar.
Yeah, there's exceptional individuals that are doing their work from a personal development standpoint that can get to these kind of same conclusions. Okay, I'm not really looking at it from that standpoint. I'm saying that really it's much more luck and a lot of hard work for any lifelong relationship between humans to work out. The evolution only cares about whether you have kids and they're viable. That's it.
Yes.
So your subsequent happiness and whether you stay together, that's like genetically
don't give a shit.
Completely not useful.
Right.
It doesn't matter. Evolution's done with you except for the caretaking of your children part of it. Once you have kids and they're viable, what does it care about your relationship? So you have to kind of look at it as the brutal truth in that sense. So in terms of falling in love and things like that, we actually chemically, we know what the systems are. There are 3 attachment systems. There's lust. I want to screw you. There's exclusivity. I want your undivided attention. And there's long-term bonding because I want to raise kids with you. Now, those actually don't happen in that order, and they don't happen the same between the two people in the couple. And that can lead to real grief and anguish and existential despair. But really, the reason we call it falling in love is because somebody's standing in front of you under some circumstances, that chemical cascade gets triggered or it doesn't. And that's just it. Anybody that's like on these dating apps and saying, I'm looking for my soulmate, I want my ride or die, I want my last first date, the certainty that that's going to happen, even though it's a completely random chemical process. Good luck with that.
So we can talk about it from a neurobiological level. The fact of the matter is that falling in love is a neurochemical response. It's PEA anyway. And PEA is a neurochemical cascade that takes place when you meet somebody, or it doesn't. As you said, it's biological. You can have it happen and you go, I don't know why, but I'm completely obsessed with this person. It doesn't make rational, logical sense. It's a biological response. Is it biological from a primal psychology level or primal biology level? Yes, but it also is from a psychology point of view, from your emotional source code, as in a set of triggers that are based on how you were wounded and how you can heal and who you are pulled to. You're most likely to be attracted to somebody who can wound you the most, because that's going to give you the opportunity to heal the most.
To learn the lesson, and it keeps getting harder and harder until you get shovel smacks to the face.
Or you take a rock diving example. For those who are really thick, you fall off a mountain. But yeah, I mean, so those things are going to happen. And it's also important to recognize that neurochemical response, that neurochemical cocktail of falling in love, has a tachyphylactic response, which means it will wear off. And at about 18 months to 24 months in a full-time relationship, that's very important to recognize. That's not a long-distance relationship. It will have worn off, and you'll be in phase 2 of relationship, which is called power struggle. And in power struggle, that's when you're going to be in the most conflict in your relationship. We talk about in phase 1 of relationship. My wife and I teach a relationship program. And in phase 1 of relationship, you can't pass each other in the hallway without saying, I want to fuck you. Right? And in phase 2 of the relationship, when you're in the power struggle, you pass each other in the hallway and you look at each other and go, fuck you. It's a different version of the same thing.
It's a different version of the same word.
But there's an evolution to the relationship too. And this is important to realize. So there's these biological factors, there's this primal psychology, primal biological level, and there's also the consciousness level. And it's what you're really putting forward. And correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, is we cannot ignore this primal psychology level, the biological level of what's going on, and we have to pay attention to that. And if we're not paying attention to that, we're distorting what's really in front of us.
Exactly. And that's really the point. So you know it's going to be distorted in the first phase of falling in love. And so what you need to do is to prepare yourself for when that wears off and, oh, that same thing that they were doing that I used to love, I now hate. Okay, does that mean that I should end the relationship? And again, there's less and less holding us together right now. And that's the problem, is if we're not doing it for the deep needs and complementary needs of raising children together, that's why relationships are also extra fragile. By the way, there's research that says if you move in with someone, your chances of a successful relationship with them without having kids go down. And that's because that's biology's way of telling you, it's like, you're living together, you're presumably screwing each other, but no kids are coming out of it. Time to move on. So there's actually evidence that cohabitation without kids is a negative impact on relationships.
Okay, let's just take a sidebar for a second and just talk about then, okay, well, what about the people who are, and by the way, I will do a proviso here, and the proviso is this. People think the divorce rate is 50%. It's not. That's bullshit. It's around 50% for people who have first-time marriages. It does not include people who live together, who never went through a ceremony. It does not include people who've been married more than once, and it does not include people who are emotionally divorced but still living in the same house, quote unquote, married. The failure rate of long-term relationships is in the high 90%. So just to be clear, high 90% is the failure rate of relationships. The fractionally small percentage who do succeed, it's not because of all the romantic ideas that you have. It's much different. It's a commitment to the evolution of the couple and the couple's mutual evolution and collective evolution. That's a different story altogether.
Yeah, my takeaway from that is that you just confirmed that we're not set up for long-term relationships. Maybe 5, 10, 15 years to raise a kid together or multiple kids, that's one thing. That's a life chapter, and that is appropriate. Okay. And then what you do after that, and if you choose to stay together despite that, or not having kids or having out of the house, then it's a personal growth mission. I don't have much to say about that from an evolutionary perspective, because that's the personal meaning you find. I choose to be in this arena with this person to learn many of my lessons for the rest of my life. That's legit. Okay. But again, that's a very personal and idiosyncratic, I would say, choice. It's not very common, actually. Most of us do it out of inertia, out of negative social consequences of getting divorced. And like you say, there's a lot of unhappy people that are still technically married.
Yeah, you go to somebody's 40th wedding anniversary and you say, what's the secret to your success? If you gave them truth serum, they go, the secret to my success is I'm miserable. This relationship is miserable. And I just don't have the balls to leave. That's more the truth.
Or I've heard it that women lose hearing in their lower register and men lose hearing in their upper register. And that's the secret to a long-term relationship right there. They stop listening to each other.
We watch TV in different rooms. I mean, this is often the case, and it's very, very, very sad. But again, that's a separate subject from what you're talking about, which is this fundamental.
One piece of symmetric advice that we give to both men and women, and I think this bears on what we were just talking about. If you're going to be in an intimate relationship, figure out the minimum, absolute minimum that you need in that relationship that you can't get met in any other relationships. So if you want a meetup group to go hiking, do that. You want a salsa dance, you don't have to do it with your wife or your husband. You have some weird charcuterie board you're working on, great, go smoke that sausage. You like indie films, you know what I'm saying. So what we tend to do is just keep piling up all these wants and ignoring the deep needs. So for me, in an intimate relationship, I want connection on a lot of different levels. I want to be able to get vulnerable, and I want intimacy as an expression of that. That's my minimums. And if you pile anything else on top of that, those are wants, not needs.
Right. And I think that that's a very important thing. What we're talking about here, even in the evolutionary psychology, is you've got to get really clear about the difference between wants and needs. You've got to get really clear about what's non-negotiable for you. Because I think that so many people are just like wandering aimlessly through life, waiting for the one, and then it's all going to work out.
Or he has a Velcro wallet and that gives me the icks. It's like, that's how you disqualify people? What the hell's wrong with you?
A lot of this has been programmed in. In the Women's Guide, you talk about stop waiting for Prince Charming. So let's just address the women's side of it for a minute, because I think that's really important. Dive into that a little bit. Help our female listeners sort of understand the evolutionary psychology, because you've talked a lot about that, but what women need to stop doing.
Yeah. So in each of the guides, we have 3 chapters. One is about insights and getting your head on right, then strategies that should result from that, and then the tactics. So actually, like I said, the dating stuff's maybe 10, 15% of the book. But these insights are really important. And for women, a couple of the key ones are that even if you're successful in the world, as it were, if you bring that energy home, you don't get extra credit for it. At best, it's neutral. If a woman is successful and the boss lady at work, the guy just wants peace in the relationship, broadly speaking, not high maintenance. He doesn't want to have the tug of wars and all of that. So it doesn't mean you don't have to be intelligent or directed or anything like that. But if a woman thinks that her resume is helping her get a relationship because of the amount of money she makes, that's what guys are set up to do. Women don't get extra credit for that. That's an insight a lot of educated women actually don't want to hear.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing, because there is this conditioning, certainly over the last 2 or 3 decades, that makes you better. But it's really understanding that what men want is different than what women want. There's a different class we're talking about, which is the consciousness evolution, which is a different thing again. But at the basic level, one of the things I will say when we're doing the couples work to the woman, I'll say, tell me why you respect him.
Oh, let me stop you right there, because that's another thing we talk about. Hey, by the way, for anyone that says this sounds like 50s, I was like, you want me to put on an apron and go back to the kitchen? No, that's not the point at all.
No.
And that's, evolutionarily speaking, a blink of an eye. Nothing's changed since then. We're still wired for the savannah 250,000 years ago. So one of the things about respect is men and women are different, because men are in a hunting party, but in a hunting party hierarchical, somebody's making the decisions. The rest of you better follow and do it instantly. So there's a clear pecking order with men. And where our place is in that hierarchy is determined by earned respect. And so if your partner, if a woman ever shows you disrespect, that means that she's pushing you down the social hierarchy. That means she's higher than you and you're lower than her. And that creates this imbalance and frustration. And no man is going to put up with that. It doesn't matter how smart you are, how much money you earn, how sexy you are. If you disrespect your man, especially publicly, you're going to destroy the relationship. And it's really, really hard for women to not give him the side eye or laugh at his collection of vinyl records or make fun of him in front of his friends. That's all stuff that really, really torpedoes relationships.
Yeah, I think that the respect thing is a really important piece that most people don't understand.
Earned respect. For men, earned respect is what matters. By the way, there's a basic level of dignity and respect you owe to every human being on the planet.
Absolutely.
And that's a non-negotiable in my book. But I'm talking about specifically earned respect that's given usually by other men to men. It's like, wow, you did that. You must have worked a long time to get that skill. Women want that guy that can change the tire or fix the sink, but they forget the years it took to be that capable.
Yeah, and the other thing about it is that from a psychology point of view, there is diminishing value to some of the things that you've become masterful at to somebody who's familiar with them. So you're telling your war stories to these people and they're very impressed by you and they give you a lot of respect. But your partner has heard that war story 50 times. And they're like, Jesus, come on, enough. So that diminishing response to that hierarchical story, that becomes a part of a problem too. And so that's why I'll ask, tell me what you respect about him. And she'll say this and this and this. And I'll look at him and say, did you know that? And he'll often say some of those things like, I had no idea. And I was like, you need to let him know that. That is important because I'll tell you something. If you want to understand, take a look at a guy who will leave his wife. She's at 9. She's screaming hot. She's a smoke show. He will leave his wife and have an affair with somebody who's a 6. And people go, why would he do that? Because she treated him with respect. Because she showed him that he was a man. And that was more valuable. That made him more attracted to her. And I think that that's part of what we don't understand, that we need that.
Yeah, so men's basic needs are pretty simple. If we decode this for the women in the women's guide, is I need to be needed, I need to feel competent, and I need to be respected. If you as a woman have such a full life that, come over to the farmer's market and give me your mild opinion on heirloom tomatoes or carry my luggage through the airport. If that's all the room you're leaving for a man in the relationship, they're going to just moonwalk out the door.
Yeah. Tim, we're already at the end of part 2. It's been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. Always love our conversations. Please make sure that people know where they can find out more about you and your books.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my speaking and executive advisory at timash.com. Unleash Your Primal Brain is at primalbrain.com. That's kind of the user manual for all human beings. And then the latest, Primal Dating, if you want to understand yourself or the opposite sex at a very profound level, that's at primaldating.com.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And for you, dear listener, remember, those who control the meaning for the tribe also control the movement of the tribe. Leaders who are committed to positively shaping the political and business landscape know that they must tap into what drives human behavior. I'm Dov Barron. I show businesses, teams, and leaders how to harness their emotional source code to move their tribe, because unified, actualized meaning is the single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for individuals and companies. Remember, we need your help in staying relevant, so please do us a favor. Wherever it is that you tune into the show from, go over, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. And of course, a big thank you to every one of you who share the show with everybody you know. It makes a huge difference, and we really appreciate it. Keep those reviews coming. They matter a lot. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about how your primal psychology is driving everything at a basic level, whether it's dating or decision-making. Everything is coming from that place. You have to look at that before you can evolve beyond it. I'm Dov Barron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, in your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.